Otto got revenge for last season's loss to UConn when he returned the favor and knocked the Huskies out of the Big East tournament this year. So it's on to the semifinals for head coach Jim Boeheim and company. Up next is Cincinnati, the team at Syracuse bounced back after its only loss of this year's campaign. Our analysts take a look at the matchup to come. Syracuse, Cincinnati on Cuse Countdown, and it's only on the web, and it starts right now. Welcome to this Big East Tournament semifinals edition of Cuse Countdown. I'm your host, Kevin Barry, alongside Ben Fontana and Evan Weston. The rust that Jim Boeheim feared getting the double bye didn't seem to be that much of an issue against UConn.
I mean, they got off to a slow start a little bit, 1 of 6 from the field. Well, UConn was 1 of 10, so it really didn't hurt them that much, and they ended up winning the first half by 3 points.
I was going to say, it did show for a little bit, but impressive comeback in the second half, led by 2 guys off the bench.
Yep.
More of those guys to come a little later in the webisode, but first, let's take a look at what the Orange is saying about the win over UConn in the tip-off. Syracuse has had an ensemble cast of characters this season, so it's no great surprise that it was James Sutherland, of all the Syracuse bench, who averaged just over 6 points a game throughout the season, who stepped up with 10 points through 27 minutes to top UConn by just 3. In fact, some introductions were in order.
We got James open a couple times. He's a tremendous shooter, and that's James Sutherland over there.
Hey, how you doing? How's everybody?
And he can make those shots, and he made them early in the year. He struggled a little bit during the league, but he's been making them in practice. He looked good the last game, made a big one, and we think he can make those shots.
That's the common theme of the year so far, is really anybody can step up in any given game.
Exactly. James Sutherland tonight, 10 points, 6 boards off the bench, and that's exactly what you got to do. Hit 2 of 5 from 3-point range, rather. And really, as Kevin said, anyone can step up.
Although this is not just an anyone thing. James Sutherland is really good at basketball. He's athletic. He can get out on the wing. He can make plays. He can shoot when he's open. James Sutherland, good player. Valuable asset going forward for the Orange.
With the win, Syracuse has knocked off UConn 6 of the last 7 times the squads have taken the floor. The last time out was just at the end of February when Syracuse secured the Big East regular season title with a tight 71-69 win at UConn. Chris Joseph led the charge with 21, while Fab Melo finished just 1 board shy of a double-double. But it was the big man slam with 31 seconds left that put SU up for good in that game. James Sutherland only had 7 points, but in Madison Square Garden, where it counts, the Bayside, New York native found his stroke.
It felt really great out there, especially being at home and all. I missed my first 2 shots. The first one I felt was good. The second one I kind of rushed. And it's good knowing that my teammates are here for me. They know I can hit shots, especially when I'm open, and they're not giving up on me. Just kind of missed like 2 shots.
And with that, you might as well play pin the tail on the SU player who will contribute against Cincinnati, because you just can't tell.
Exactly. I mean, a guy like James Sutherland stepped up tonight, but tomorrow against Cincinnati, I think it's going to be Chris Joseph. He went 1 of 8 from the field today, really struggled in the game, but he ended up with 10 points anyway. But it's got to be Chris Joseph, the senior leader at Madison Square Garden, where he's dominated before. He's got to step up.
I was actually looking at Joseph, too. He had a big statement dunk last time against Cincinnati to put Syracuse up after they trailed in the first half in that game. They ended up winning that one by 7. It could be anyone, though. That's the point. When you have this kind of depth, you have the luxury where you can just throw anyone out there. Someone's going to step up.
And as we take a look at exactly what the remaining Big East field looks like, the teams left are starting to dwindle, and that pesky Notre Dame squad is still around, the only team that beat Syracuse so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, a guy like Jack Cooley, who, Evan just falls in love with, is a great player on the offensive boards, a great player on the defensive boards.
Hey, Jack Cooley is one of a kind, but he wasn't facing Fab Melo last time. Could be a different story in the championship game.
We'll bring in Ryan Koletty, who is in the Big Apple for Syracuse's win over UConn. And first off, Ryan, Madison Square Garden is the closest thing Syracuse has to a home that isn't called the Carrier Dome, but at the end of the day, it's still New York City, and it's still the world's most famous arena.
Well, Kevin, nobody likes the lights of Madison Square Garden more so than Dion Waiters, and he led the Orange today with 18 points, and after the game, he told me the lights just bring the best out of him. And I think if the Orange are going to make the championship game of this Big East tournament, it's going to be on the back of Dion.
Dion might be used to the limelight, but one guy who might not be is James Sutherland. Where did he come from today?
Well, welcome back to the scoring sheet, James Sutherland. He was struggling in the middle of this season. He finally found his touch today. He said to me after the game that he hadn't changed anything in practice. He just kept shooting the shots that he normally was taking. And Scoop Jardine told me that James is going to be very important for the Orange's chances to make a deep run in the postseason, being that outside scoring threat.
And up ahead for the Cuse is Cincinnati. That one-day turnaround can be pretty rough when you win the way that the Bearcats did today.
Well, a grueling win for Cincinnati. They finally put away Georgetown in double overtime, and after the game, Vic Cronin was asked about Syracuse, but he said that was the furthest thing from his mind right now. He just needs to show up at 7 o'clock. They'll be there. That's all he had to offer his thoughts on playing the Orange tomorrow night in the semifinals.
Thank you, Ryan. The last time these two squads took the floor, life was pretty different for SU. It had just lost its first game of the season. That was against Notre Dame. Fab Melo was suspended indefinitely because he was temporarily academically ineligible, and there was a tough team in West Virginia waiting for the Cuse when it got back to Syracuse. Boeheim and company walked away with a 7-point win on the back of Chris Joseph's 17 points and 6 rebounds. And now we give our analysts their PF Flyers, and they'll run the fast break. So first up, Fab Melo will outplay Yancey Gates down low.
I'm going to have to dish this one. And the reason being, I know Fab Melo is a great player and all, but Yancey Gates is just one of a kind. He had 16 and 10 in the first matchup and 23 points and 8 rebounds against Georgetown. That's the kind of player that Fab Melo is going to struggle with. I know Fab Melo did not play against Yancey Gates when SU played Cincinnati back in January. I think it's going to be an interesting matchup, but Gates is going to have the edge.
Well, first of all, I think you're underselling Melo a little bit. I'm going to dunk this one. The guy won Big East Defensive Player of the Year, averaged 3 blocks a game. Gates may be an offensive threat. He's terrible defensively. In Mick Cronin's system, he keeps flying out to the wing randomly with absolutely no sense of direction.
Like in overtime.
He did it, and Henry Sims was able to get that layup to send it to the second overtime in the quarterfinal. Gates is not effective enough defensively, where Fab should be able to not a double-double and still play good defense.
James Sutherland came out of the Orange woodwork. Is he able to do it for the rest of the Big East tournament?
Well, I mean, it's tough to say. The matchup with Cincinnati, I like for Sutherland. I think he's a solid player. Again, really underrated on this team. A lot of people sort of write him off. If you were to forget about somebody on Syracuse, it would probably be James Sutherland. But in the end, had a big game today, had a big game last time against Notre Dame. He was the guy who stepped up in the one game they lost. So
yeah, but you can't. Yeah, I know, but you can't always rely on James Sutherland. You got to look at a guy like Scoop Jardine because he had 0 points against Louisville and only 2 points against tonight in their win over in the Big East tournament. So you got to look at it to step up against Cincinnati. Scoop's got to score a lot of points.
That was UConn at Syracuse got past, and a lot of close games for Syracuse this year. So is this game against Cincinnati within 5 points?
Yeah, it's got to be. I mean, there's been close games in the Big East all season long, and in the tournament, it's shown a double overtime game between Georgetown and Cincinnati, and overtime between Notre Dame and USF. So you got to figure that it's going to go down to the wire once again.
I'm actually going to agree with you here. I'm dunking this. This is going to be a close one. Cincinnati and Syracuse, two of the best teams that play close games in the Big East. Cincinnati's now won 9 of 14. Syracuse's record obviously a little bit better than that in a close one. This one's going down to the wire.
In these elimination tournaments, it makes winning every single game that much more important. So what does Syracuse absolutely need to make sure it gets to the semifinals?
Well, I mean, they're playing 2 games in 2 days, so they really just got to keep up, keep fresh. That's basically all I have to say. Dion Waiters scored 18 points in this one, and a guy like Michael Carter-Williams, Rakeem Christmas, who only got 8 minutes apiece, are going to be more fresh. So look for Jim Boeheim to insert them into the lineup and keep the guys fresh, looking for maybe a third game and a third day.
I'm going to take a look at Cincinnati. They have to stop Kashmir Wright. That's what Syracuse has to do. Kashmir Wright opened up the last game on January 23rd against Syracuse with 3 threes that put them up 15-6. He is just absolutely explosive. You shoot over the 2-3 zone. If Kashmir Wright can keep that 3 going consistently, he was only 1 of 5 in the second half of that game, Syracuse could be in trouble.
Yeah.
They call it March Madness because you can never really predict what's going to happen. But that's exactly what we're going to ask you guys to do. What's the final score?
It's a tough one. And in the Big East tournament, you can never really tell. But I'm going to say this one goes into overtime, just like the rest of the games did in the quarterfinals. In the semifinals, I have Syracuse winning 61-59 with a guy like Scoop Jardine really stepping up. And hopefully Chris Joseph, who struggled from the field, steps up again. And the senior leadership, that starting lineup, gets going for SU.
Well, Ben, I'm not so bold as to pick an overtime game. But I do think it'll be low scoring and close. We've seen this script play out for SU so many times this year. Both Louisville games, South Florida, even UConn in the quarterfinal yesterday. This is the kind of game Syracuse thrives on. They sort of run with you for a little while, and then right when you need it, they explode and they overpower you for the victory.
That's all the time we have on this webisode, looking ahead to SU's matchup with Cincinnati. But be sure to follow along on Twitter at CitrusTV Sports and at Cuse Countdown for all the in-game updates from the Big East tournament and later on the NCAA tourney when it gets underway. With Ben and Evan, I'm Kevin. Thanks for watching.